The movie is set in the year 1964 and is based on a real-life practice that existed among the Irish Roman Catholic community. At the time, people sent the so-called fallen women into a popular asylum called the Magdalene, claiming that it is for their redemption. Among these women is the protagonist of the movie, Margaret. On the joyous occasion of a wedding party, she is inappropriately assaulted by her own cousin in a dark room while the party is in full swing downstairs. Among the loud celebration, none of the guests hear her cries for help. After he finally leaves her alone, Margaret gathers the courage to tell her family about what happened. But what happens next is something she would never have imagined in her wildest dreams. They put the blame on her instead, claiming that she is a seductress who just wants attention. The very next morning, she is driven off to the Magdalene Asylum without any warning. The second protagonist is also a young woman named Bernadette, whose only sin is being beautiful. She is kicked out of her boarding school and is sent to the asylum overnight after her teacher accuses her of being flirtatious. Somewhere else, there is a third woman named Rose, who has a child out of wedlock. Her parents force her to put the baby up for adoption as soon as he is born, and Rose herself is taken to none other than Magdalene. The entire asylum is filled with women with similar stories who have been sent to live there indefinitely. What are you in for? I said I don't like making sandwiches. I did long division. I murdered my husband. On the first day, the three women are introduced to Crispina. She is a little slow and shows signs of mental disability, but is rather friendly. She excitedly whispers to Rose about her son, who comes along with Crispina's sister to the asylum's gate sometimes. Because she is not allowed to talk to them, she only waves at them happily every time while clutching her pendant. As it turns out, the main task assigned to the women here is doing the laundry, which the asylum does business in. It is a laborious task without the help of washing machines, and it takes a toll on the women's bodies. It is especially difficult for Rose, who has given birth barely days ago. But the regime in Magdalene is unforgiving, and she must follow every rule that is set without expecting any special treatment. The women start adapting to their new way of life, accepting their fate for being born female. Then, one morning, when a nun comes into the women's shared room to wake them up, she finds that a girl has gone missing. This incident causes the place to change from how it usually operates, as the nuns are kept busy in search of the missing girl. Margaret wants to take this opportunity to escape home, but the same night she plans her escape, the missing girl is dragged into the shared room by her father. She had run back home, but her family did not want anything to do with her. Her father also does not care about her pleas nor her cries, and instead threatens to cripple her if she tries to run away again. Assuming this is exactly how she would be treated if she went back, Margaret dismisses her plan. The next morning, the women go on about their usual tasks of collecting dirty laundry from the delivery men and returning them washed clothes. They notice a new face among the men and try to make a conversation before finding out he has quite the foul personality. He badmouths all the women in Magdalene and even makes inappropriate advances towards Bernadette. He even yells derogatory things in Fortnite lobbies. Even so, nothing can be done about his behavior, because when Bernadette goes to the head nun to complain, she is punished instead for having a loose character. Frustrated by the way they are treated inside the asylum and by the society, she becomes determined to leave the place by any means possible. The next morning, she begins her plan to seduce the delivery man and run away with him. However, the plan does not go as well as she had thought, because some simple kissing is not enough to convince him to elope with her. So, she takes things a step further and lets him see her private parts. This makes the delivery man agree to help her in his moment of lust.
Whoa, goodness me, look at them privates.
Bernadette's near-perfect scheme is almost ruined when an old woman of the asylum finds her exposing herself to the delivery man. She immediately runs to the woman and begs her not to tell the head nun, but she refuses to listen. Only when Bernadette threatens to kill herself does she hesitate and temporarily give up on the idea. That night, the delivery man keeps his promise to Bernadette and sneaks into the asylum to open the back door and let her escape. But just when Bernadette desperately runs through the hallways of the building, the delivery man starts having second thoughts.
Maybe it's my back door that I want to open.
He changes his mind right before Bernadette reaches the door and closes the lock again. She begs him to open the door, but the man is not ready to risk his job to help a girl he barely knows. So, he silently leaves the way he came, but this leaves Bernadette to face her punishment for attempting to escape. She struggles and screams, but the nuns firmly capture her and violently cut off her hair before leaving her all bloody. Years pass as the women of the asylum are stuck doing the same task every day without rest, until finally, the asylum brings in washing machines, which makes the job easier. To celebrate, the nuns hold a sadistic contest. They force all the fallen women to line up naked to compare things like who has the biggest breasts or who is the hairiest. These nuns love buns. This event deeply scars Crispina and affects her sense of self-worth. Tired of living her life in a loop, she decides to sleep with a soaked nightgown on, hoping she would get the flu and die. But to her disbelief, Margaret reveals to her that young people cannot die from a simple flu. Right then, Crispina discovers something else that makes her frantic. Her pendant that she holds so close to her heart has gone missing. Margaret manages to soothe her cries by promising to find it for her, but after losing her precious keepsake, she is determined to kill herself, even if it means committing a grave sin and going to hell. That night, she ties up her bed sheets into a noose and tries to hang herself inside the bathroom. Thankfully, she is discovered by Margaret, and she, along with other women, are able to rescue Crispina in time. They console her late into the night before eventually going to bed. The next morning, the Magdalene Asylum is having a film made about itself. For the sake of the movie, the nuns and the priest pose the asylum as a joyous place, full of laughter and exciting activities. While inmates are swept up in the change of scenery from their usual laborious days, they genuinely begin to feel happy without having to pretend for the camera, all except for Margaret. Margaret is in great turmoil because this morning she had accidentally discovered the priest taking advantage of Crispina's simple-minded nature as he convinced her to give him a sexual favor. Margaret's already weak trust in the asylum shatters completely. It is unbelievable that she has to place her faith in these nuns and priests to cleanse her of her sin, while they themselves are the biggest sinners in Magdalene. Unable to stand still and do nothing, she runs off to the back garden to pick up some leaves from a plant. She is careful not to touch it and wraps the leaves up in a handkerchief while she spots an unlocked door. She cautiously steps out the door and sees the scenery in front of her. She is finally out of the asylum. She could escape right now if she wants to, but for some unknown reason, she doesn't. Margaret even lets go of the car that was ready to give her a lift and goes back inside with a newfound resolve. That night after dinner, she heads to the communal sleeping room before the rest of the women and turns the entire place upside down to search for Crispina's pendant. When she finds it, hidden among Bernadette's belongings, she goes mad with rage. She attacks Bernadette as soon as she enters the room and starts shouting curses at her. But Crispina, who is the victim of her theft, is just happy to get her pendant back. The next morning, Margaret is the one who is put in charge of the priest's laundry. She dutifully puts his dirty clothes inside the washing machine, but then sneakily dumps in the leaves that she had collected the other day. A few days later, it is some sort of a festival. The inmates are dressed up in good clothes and are led out of the asylum to parade around the town. They are herded along by the nuns while the priests lead the parade. The sound of bagpipes is loud and sharp as the onlookers eye the inmates, as if they are some fascinating creatures. The procession comes to a stop at a wide field. All the people belonging to Magdalene and the common people gather together to listen to the priest as he recites Bible verses. While the priest is giving a speech, Margaret cannot keep her smile contained because her plan is bearing fruit right before her eyes. The priest soon grows uncomfortable in his clothes as the itchiness in his body slowly grows before becoming unbearable. He shouts and screams as he frantically rips off all the layers of his clothes one after another until he is completely naked. In front of the large gathering of people, he runs off to the fields, being unable to withstand the violent red rashes that have spread all around his body. But it's too late. The township has already seen his micro-penis. But right then, Crispina also begins to feel itchiness on her inner thighs. Foolishly, she tries to ask the nuns for help, but they sternly tell her to sit down quietly. It is obvious to everybody, and Margaret even more so, that the priest was entangled in an intimate affair with Crispina right before the ceremony. Crispina, who sees the nun's indifference and the priest's shameful behavior, is unable to hold her emotions in. She starts shouting, "You are not a man of God," repeatedly. The nuns cannot restrain her because they have to uphold their image, so they can only watch as she continues screaming. After getting back to Magdalene, Crispina is immediately sent off to a mental hospital to silence her from revealing the abuse she suffered at the hands of the priest. As expected, Crispina doesn't want to go, but her struggle is meaningless as the doctors come to violently drag her out, despite her miserable pleas. Days pass, and it is the day of celebrating Christmas now. The inmates and the nuns gather together in a room to watch a cheesy religious movie. Right when the movie ends, Margaret's brother appears inside the room. He has come with their father's letter to get her out of the asylum. Margaret feels unreal that she could just leave this easily with a simple letter. She is overjoyed, but also frustrated that it took 4 years for her brother to come. She sharply walks out of Magdalene with her head held high, refusing to give way for the head nun. She opts to get down on her knees and start praying in the middle of the hallway, which forces the head nun to step aside instead. An unknown amount of time passes by, a few days, maybe a few years. The life at the asylum is as usual, with new fallen women coming in and old fallen women in their deathbeds, and the nuns continue to exploit the inmates. Seeing a baby getting adopted from this place, Rose is reminded of her own child. She realizes that his birthday is coming soon and wants to send him a card. She goes to the head nun's office to make her request, but the nun does not care for a single word she has to say and is too busy searching for the key of a locker. The nun, who is rummaging through the room, orders Rose to begin searching as well. The key is very important, as it opens the locker where the nun keeps all her money. When she hears this, Rose freezes and doesn't grab the key, which she has already located under a cupboard. She apologizes for being unable to find it and steps out of the room. The same day, after witnessing the death of an old inmate who was stuck inside the asylum for over 40 years, Bernadette grows fearful for her future. No one is going to come save her like Margaret, so the only choices left for her is to escape or to rot in this place until she dies. That night, hardened with a new resolve, Bernadette convinces Rose to escape with her. They use the bed frame to break the door of their bedroom. The loud noise wakes up the other inmates, but they all pretend to have not seen a thing and go back to sleep. With their loud footsteps echoing through the building, they run to the head nun's office to search for the gate key. When they finally find it hidden inside a drawer, the head nun suddenly appears and snatches the key right out of Bernadette's hands and proceeds to beat her. But she is able to overpower the old nun and threatens to slit her throat with scissors. Even at a disadvantage, the head nun stubbornly refuses to break her hold of the key, and the two women struggle back and forth. The deadlock is broken by Rose, who hands over the key of the money locker in exchange for the key of the gate. The head nun, whose greed for money is well known, lets go of the gate key. At last, the two of them finally manage to escape the asylum while fending off other nuns who come to block their way. They run through the fields and jump over wooden gates without stopping or looking back until they finally reach town. There, they approach a female hairstylist to ask for help, and she kindly gives them new clothes and some money. With her help, Rose gets on a bus to Liverpool, where she wishes to start a new life, while Bernadette remains there to work as an apprentice hairstylist at the salon. The movie ends there, as they tell us what happened to the women after leaving Magdalene. Bernadette eventually moved to Scotland to open her own salon, and got married and divorced 3 times. Rose also got married and had 2 daughters, but she only managed to find her son 33 years after he was taken from her. Margaret never married and became a primary school teacher and eventually an assistant headmistress. Crispina, whose real name was Harriet, died of anorexia in the mental institution at the age of 24. Subscribe for more videos like this, turn on notifications, and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.